Warning. Listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
And welcome back to another episode of Influencers Radio. You know, finding your purpose in life. It's something that just about everyone has thought about. You know, we seem to have a built-in want, or even a need to feel inspired to do exceptional things, or at least make our time here matter. But what happens if one day you realize that the life that you are leading is unexceptional, is uninspired? You just feel like you're spinning your wheels and that the path you're on isn't going to lead you where you want to be. Well, if you get to that point, then it's time to make a change. And whether that means a change in job, career, your health, even relationships, making major changes can be difficult, but finding your new path to purpose in life is certainly a journey worth exploring. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So my guest is Jennifer Zenz-Olson. She is the founder and owner of Laughing Lotus Wellness, where she guides successful women on their path to purpose when they feel like they've lost that sense of alignment. As a purpose coach and expert, Jennifer combines over 20 years of clinical social work experience with her favorite effective healing modalities for a new way to approach realizing and embracing purpose. Her sense of humor, creativity, and playful approach provide a perfect balance to helping her clients pave that path to purpose and create a fresh start at any age. Jennifer, welcome to Influencers Radio.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you, Jack. Thank you.
Well, one thing that just really struck me as I've been kind of following what you're doing is, and I mentioned it there, that balance. Well, you certainly have a wonderful sense of humor that shines through, and your laugh is infectious and the things that you do. But it is that balance, that you have that balance between your experience as the social work, the clinical experience with some things that may be a little bit that people feel are kind of new or out there, maybe not experienced with or understand the power of. And you just, package that all together in such a wonderful way. So I'd like to kick this off by asking you kind of what the meaning is behind Laughing Lotus Wellness, and kind of what kind of inspired that?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. For me, Laughing Lotus Wellness was born out of necessity. In a moment, we were in a crisis in our practice and really afraid we were going to have to close doors. And so in this really pivotal, life-changing moment, I needed to derive a direction. And what Laughing Lotus Wellness is really built on is one of my biggest values is truly using a sense of humor. And so using a sense of humor to me is like the great human common denominator. We laugh and we smile in the same language, and no matter where we go. And so to me, in my life, I've used it to cope and I use it to connect both. And so it's something that I've always embraced in my practice with all of my coaching clients and all of the things that I host, whether it be a retreat or events. And so that's just one of my very base kind of value sets. And so you see that in every single thing that I provide. And the lotus is it's this really incredible story of this blossom, this beautiful white blossom, sinks down into this kind of murky, muddy, gross pond water, wherever it's residing. Every single night it sinks into that kind of mucky water, and every single day it comes up, it's literally pristine. And so what it really symbolizes is this idea of rebirth and renewal and resetting ourselves. And I value so much after those, over 20 years of working with clients, our human resilience and the ability to begin again and again. We begin in the next breath, we begin in the next hour, and really giving ourselves that opportunity to start fresh again and again in our lives, on our journeys, as often as we need it, and in whatever format that takes. And so that was always one of the pivotal ways that I viewed my work as well. And so Laughing Lotus is really this idea of using that humor and creating that space for people to really begin again on their journey with the work that we do together.
Well, I think, that's so powerful because I guess changing lanes in life is a very frightening thing for a lot of people.
It is.
And I think people get set in their ways and into the way that you open up the doors and open people's eyes. That really every morning that you wake up, you have a decision and you can walk in any direction that you want. All right. But I think so many people are stuck on this path that feel like, I'm not on the right path, but maybe it's the path of least resistance, or I've gotten this far. It's too late for me to change now. So what do you say to that? The ability to overcome that fear of I know I'm not doing what I'm not on the path to my purpose. I know that I may not know what my purpose is, but I know this isn't it. How do you overcome that fear to say, it's time to make a change?
Yeah, that's such a powerful direction to support people in. And so one of my very favorite phrases that I created years ago was, you need to be the boss of our energy. And really what that is empowering and inspiring people to remember that they have choice. All of us can get in that hamster wheel notion of our lives and our journeys, and we kind of get complacent and we get, like you said, comfortable, right? But what happens is comfortable doesn't actually suspend us or protect us in a space of feeling that our lives are really deeply meaningful, that we feel vital. So we can tell when we're starting to kind of wind down in a way that's not really serving us, when we stop feeling as vital and inspired and motivated. I love those words that you used a few minutes ago. And so really it's reinvigorating, kind of reigniting the fire in someone to understand you actually get to be the author of your own story. That it's not just this random thing that happens to you, but rather you get to be this incredible author of your very own story. And at any time you can turn that page and create a whole other chapter that's something that's so powerful and meaningful for yourself, and also what you're going to do and leave in the world, that legacy that you want to create. And so really what it comes down to is finding the spaces where you can be nurtured and supported as you unravel and work out what that looks like. Most of even me, we need clarity. One of the really common things I find with my clients is that they come in and they're like, look, I know I'm here to do something big. I have this sense in my bones. I've stumbled through some things in my life. I'm just not exactly sure where I'm going or what I'm meant to do. And so one of the biggest keys that we want to always take advantage of is spending some time, real time, getting to understand what someone's gifts and talents are that they bring to the world, because those are never accidental. And so what we want to do is highlight, where have you been? Where do you feel drawn to go? How are we going to help get you there? And so much of that beginning work that we're going to do together is always going to be an unraveling and understanding what you were put here to do in the first place. And how can you do that? That might look like a job or career thing. For you, it might look like something else. Every single person is different. And so but again, that emphasis is always going to be on reminding people that they aren't victims to their lives, that they actually get to be the drivers of what their legacy and dreams look like.
It's really people like to think in things in very I don't know what you call it. People want things to be put in a nice box, to really define, right? The things, and the one thing that I notice as I look at the things that you do and the things that you talk about, I kind of I look at people in two different groups. And there's the people that in their life, every day they do things that they feel like they have to do in their life. And then there's the other people that seem like every day their day is filled with things that they feel like they get to do. Right. Yeah. Because there's some people that may not know, they know something's not right. Something's out of whack. So how can they tell that they're not really in alignment with their purpose.
Yeah. And so I think what you start to notice, I went through this in my mid-40s. I had really a successful practice, and which in our field, there's lots of practices don't make it a year out. And so very, very, proud and grateful for that journey. And so what happened was about my mid-40s, I really started to, actually probably around 40, I really started to have this big pivotal shift. And I began to really realize that one of the big important things was really paying attention to how we're showing up to that daily journey, like you said. And what I found was I was waking up and I was Sunday morning dreading Monday morning. So my Sundays were gone because it was already a process of being energetically engaged in dread. And from Monday, I dreaded every single day and started to pray for Friday. And so one of the things that I think we really want to be aware of, and I got caught in that, and I do yoga, I do meditation, I take care of myself. I'm pretty self-aware. And so I think it's really interesting that I'm no different than anyone else, really landed in this space of going, gosh, how the hell did I get here? I spent all this time and energy, developed this life from the outside looking in that looks phenomenal, successful. But what's happening is I'm getting up every day, and instead of feeling revitalized, excited, passionate, creative, driven, I was sad and anxious and only waiting for the weekends to really feel alive again. And so I want to say that is one of those pivotal, if we're in that hamster wheel and you're every single week feels like kind of one thing, again, you have to do over and over again, and there's no excitement and enthusiasm. You don't feel connected. You don't feel so vital, then that's how we begin to know something is really amiss. And I've been there, right? I'm speaking from very personal experience and in a situation where I was successful. By all intents and purposes, somebody on the outside looking in would have been like, wow, that lady has got it nailed down. I had friends say it to me. And so that's lovely from the outside looking in. But if I'm walking around in the world and I'm feeling amiss and I feel like, wow, I know my personality, a pivotal moment for me, and this is just a great little anecdotal story, was I was in this space of trying to unravel, like, gosh, what's going on for me? And this is so not my personality. And one of my clients came in, and it was on a Friday, and we're visiting about, whatever. And she says to me, she just pauses and she says, is everything okay with you? And I said, yeah, I'm kind of shocked and taken aback a little bit. I go, yeah, why? What makes you ask? And she said, Jen, you just don't laugh as much anymore. And it was legitimately in that moment, I knew I needed the wake-up call that I said, I'm done. If a client that has only known me for X amount of years, probably a couple of years I've been working with her at the time, can look at me in the face and without any judgment, she meant it with zero judgment attached, to give me this reflection about how much I had changed in just that span of time, I knew something was clearly amiss. So when you're picking up, your personality has changed, your level of joy has changed, your level of engagement. My husband lovingly asked him just the other day, I said, what was I like? Because it's funny, I love my work so much. I like live, sleep, eat, and breathe my work because I love it so much now. And I said, what was it like? And he said, you were kind of isolated. You kind of went away. It was like you were always in your head and you were always kind of trying to work things out and sort of just cope. And coping isn't living. Coping isn't surviving. We are not meant. We were never put on this earth to cope. We were meant to live as vital, vibrant, radiant human beings because each of us is wired with singular, unique talents and gifts that only each of us has. And so Wayne Dyer, one of my favorite quotes, he's one of my very favorite spiritual gurus, said, I never wanted to die with a song in my heart. Meaning, we all have that beautiful, unique signature marker in each of us, and it is our job on this planet to live that out. And so if you're not having that sense of living that out anymore, even if your life looks and feels ideal to other people, you have to feel that. And you have to know that you are using your talents, your gifts, for the highest good of all in some form of service. And that's really when you know you're in that zone, right? In that flow or in alignment. And so it's really all of those small markers that begin to add up over time that really tell you that something's amiss and that you might want to take a look at what's going on.
Well, I could definitely say, and you just demonstrated exactly that. For one thing, I can't imagine someone saying that, hey, you don't seem to laugh anymore. That just seems to be part of your makeup. So something's got to be wrong. But you did. I mean, you have been there. You've gone to the other side, and it seemed like you brought back a map because you were doing things that, when you talked about Sunday and Monday, all you could think about were the things you have to do, rather than this week is filled with things I get to do. But you said something really interesting, that you said for all, the outward appearances, from what other people saw, you were successful, right? Yeah. And how do you find that people get caught in that trap of trying to achieve other people's vision of success rather than defining their own vision? Because, your own vision of success may not be the same financial level that other people think, or the same, business level. Yeah. Do you find that some people fall in that trap of they're trying to meet the expectations or the definition of other people's success rather than defining themselves what their success would be and following that track?
Absolutely. I think we can, all of us get really stuck. Culturally, we have an idea of what success means, right? And so much of that is, like you said, it's achievement based, it's financially based. We have this notion about, what that looks like. And so I think it's really important for people to be aware that, like, there's this big influence on all of us. It's pressing in that gives us an idea about how we should, in quotes, show up to success and what it's going to look and feel like. And for me, one of the bigger, pivotal moments was really, hey, I did all this work and I was licensed as a clinical social worker. I worked really hard for my master's degree and for this license and to earn all of these things, this deep sense of responsibility. And so moving out of that space was a really hard transformation for me, because I have this responsibility to these people and to the practice and but it's doing well, it's thriving, we're making money, all the things that really, in quotes, should have been, right, that fulfilling notion of life. And at one point, Jack, and this is important, at one point it was. At one point in my journey, I couldn't wait to get out of bed and go to my clinical practice. I couldn't wait to see my clients and do that work. So it's interesting that, and this is a really pivotal thing for all of us to know, is that what feels good at one point and very purpose-filled and driven can shift over time, because as human beings, we're in a constant state of evolution. And so it isn't that I wasn't serving my purpose the whole time. It was just that I arrived in a place where I went, oh, I'm going to have to change this, because my idea, like you said, of success is shifting. And at one point it was opening the doors to a private practice and seeing clients in an ethical way that I felt passionate about, bringing my creativity and humor, right? And supporting whoever I was working with in those modalities. And then as I practiced, I started to have this niggling sense of dis-ease. Of that, right? And so that's, again, where I started getting that, what I call a calling, because you begin to notice by that discomfort, like, wow, this really once felt so good to me, and now I'm in this weird space. Something's going wrong. Something's amiss. And what it's really calling you to do is to bring awareness to it. And so that's, I think it's really interesting to watch that evolution for each of us, that moving away from this notion of what's, socially acceptable, right? That we're really going to have to be open to listening to the intuition, that kind of pull in a new direction. And that can be really scary for people, because you might have worked really hard, right? I did, to develop this practice. This was my baby. This was my mission, my journey. And so unraveling that piece and really allowing myself to step into that was so pivotal. And it's pivotal for all of us, because our ideas, again, of success are going to look different at different stages of our lives. And so we want to allow that to really evolve and morph into the current version of who we are, where we stand today, and be able to release and let go of those old ideas that just likely are not serving us anymore.
I don't know if it's just my dumb male brain, or, but I think in fairly concrete terms. And one thing I can appreciate with you is, even though you do things that are very, feeling based, you're able to describe them in very concrete terms. And so one of them is, you talked about how, I guess in concrete terms or in business, it's sunk costs. People, feel like, well, I've already invested this time or money or whatever. So I need to, I can't waste that. I got to keep doing it regardless of how miserable it makes me. Right.
Yes.
But being able to let go of that, I think, is something that is a struggle for a lot of people. And I'm sure that, not just about, I don't really like what I'm doing, but it can have it seems like a pretty heavy impact on someone's mental health. Can you talk a little bit about that, on what the impact on mental health? Because that's one thing that you kind of uniquely, you have that background in that side of it. How can that impact when you're not living your purpose and feeling like you have to follow that sunk cost of what you've already invested in?
Yeah. And I think that's so true and real for people, is that what I find as I look back through my clinical history, it's one of those things where, hindsight 2020. And sometimes now I'm like, oh, I wish I had some of this wisdom and insight from my clients back in the day, because I just wonder what that work might have looked like. And I give myself compassion, because it's like, okay, you only can know what you know in your evolution. And so what I think about is, when I look at my clients and even myself, what happens is, I think some of the sneaking things that end up kind of winding in to our experiences is that we can begin to feel a little more anxious. We begin to feel depressed. And again, I don't want to make any, vast clinical statements here like you have a clinical depression. But what we can find is that we just feel a little lower. We feel, again, I was isolating. Look at how my husband, beautifully, explained that to me, was this sense of I wasn't necessarily as present. And so I truly believe that over time, when we are misaligned in some way and not living on that path, and maybe in not the right lane anymore, we'll begin to kind of sense this edginess, maybe irritability. It could look like depression, anxiety. Honestly, many people also, it manifests physically for them. People begin to get and develop, things like chronic headaches, stomach aches, digestive issues. We have lots of chronic issues out there anymore. And I'm convinced that in many ways, so many of us, it's actually just manifestation, okay, of this idea that we are really not aligned. And it's not as a criticism. This is just a humanity, right? We can't know what we don't know. And so I really, truly believe now, as I progress and move into some of those more spiritual realms and working with energy, is that awareness that we're holding on to those old stories and histories within our very selves. And so if we're not contending with that, we're sort of missing the forest for the trees a little bit. And so we're carrying around this history and this pain and these things in our bodies and ourselves and in the energy field that we live in. And that goes with us. It's like luggage. And so if we don't ever unpack that, that can become very heavy. And so that's what I think ends up sort of creating that sense of depression, anxiety, irritability. And so it can kind of come out sideways, right? And it might look like someone who feels like they've got to come home and have a glass of wine every night to go to sleep. Right? We start developing these sort of symptoms that look like from the outside in, like, oh, we've got a little problem developing here. I've got a little anxiety or depression. It's like, yes. And I want to understand why that is. That's the very clinical root of how I'm wired. I want to understand why. How did we get here? And so I really think that there are incredible tools to look for, okay, what am I looking for? I'm looking for these symptoms. I'm looking to understand that there are these facets of how you're functioning that are actually indicating that there's something more serious going on underneath. And we want to understand what that is.
Well, I think what I'd like to do is to shift gears a little bit, because I believe that, anyone that's listening to this right now who is resonating with what you are saying is probably at the point that they're thinking, okay, I have a pretty good idea of what I need to do. And it may not be comfortable, but they may now be thinking, So how do I do it? So let's shift to kind of the tactical side of this.
Sure.
If someone understands that, I'm not doing what I've meant to do, I'm not doing what makes me happy, even though someone else may think I'm successful, it's not fulfilling to me. So what would be the first step? And I think it's wonderful that there's someone like you, that people don't have to do this alone or to figure this out alone.
Right.
So let's start with understanding, the foundation or the power of having that support when you're looking for this new path to purpose, and also some of the steps that people can take on their own to understand what that true purpose may be.
Right. Yeah. That's so powerful to know is to have that sense of direction. Because one of my, so I have 5 secret ingredients that I talk about, and I really break these down more in the course and the coaching that I provide. But I really think there's some pivotal things that sort of help us get back on that path, that start driving direction for us to really create transformation. And one is, and this is again clinical, this is my clinical background, is speaking, in conjunction with all those things that I love to do in terms of the spiritual growth as well. But one is self-awareness, which sounds really basic. But self-awareness, the key is really going to be in understanding your stories. And so it's interesting, earlier, Jack, you said something about, but I did all this work and maybe I spent all this money and I put all this time and energy into being where I am, right? And what we want to understand is that on your path to purpose, nothing is wasted. Nothing. So every single bit of our journeys is actually like preparation and training for stepping fully into your purpose. I truly believe we're actually gifted the experiences that are preparing us. It's like the astronauts when they're doing all of their work, right? And they're learning all these, right? And so it sounds funny, but it's like they have to go through all of this immense training so that they're ready to go out and do this thing. That's no different than us. And so what we're really doing is, even the hard moments. I was talking to a gentleman on a podcast, and he was saying, he's like, back in my life, he actually worked at NASA, which I was like fascinated. I'm like, that is the coolest thing ever. And he said, yeah, but I really didn't feel it. And now it feels like such a waste. And I was like, oh, nothing's ever a waste. You had to be there, even if it's uncovering the things that aren't meant for us or what we are not strong in. Every single step of the journey is always guiding us. Every single step, we're always being guided. And so the first step is really about self-awareness. And that's where it becomes pivotal to have support, right? That's where coaching and things like that come into play. And I've done all the things. I've been to therapy, I've done coaching, I hire healers, I do all the things that I offer, I do them. And so it's really pivotal to begin to develop self-awareness around the stories of your life and how they might be adding struggle and conflict for you, because so very often there's old stories in history back there, way back in time, that actually are still really riding around with us, and they don't serve us. And if we don't unravel that, one of my biggest beliefs is that we have to unravel that, because those are going to be those unseen tripping points in your journey. And very often they're going to be the reasons that we cyclically struggle. Right? That we kind of see, like, I kind of think I'm getting my way, and then, I'm tripping again. And then I kind of am going in this new direction, and I'm tripping again. And what's really happening is we haven't uncovered those old stories and beliefs, those limiting beliefs that are going to get in your way. And so for me, one of the very first things is that big self-awareness, working on identifying limiting beliefs is just huge. That second piece is going to look a lot like self-care. And so I am a big fan of radical self-care, which sounds so, cliche today. We hear so much about it, right? It's sort of like everybody goes to sleep when you hear the word self-care together. But really what I want to say is that I think it's such a pivotal component that if I begin to build the base of taking really great care of myself and seeing the value of spending time really nurturing myself, whatever that looks like, and everyone's different, that's what we uncover in the work, right? Is how am I going to really hold space for myself then to do this work? How can I be self-aware? How can I have compassion? How can I make space for my humanity? And then how can I really absorb and step into my greatness, my power? And so those are some things that we use as building blocks as we go. And then that dives into number 3 would look like knowing your unique talents. You have to know what you're good at. Where do you shine? Where are the moments that you feel the most lit up on the inside? Got a great friend of mine. He works at Polaris, where I love him. He's a great example. Works on snowmobiles and toys. And he'll talk about it, even if it's not my thing, right? It's not even my thing. And I can't listen to him and not have this big grin on my face because he is so excited about what he does. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those real moments of like absolute inspiration, light in the face, joy in the heart, enthusiasm in voice. We know when we stumble across something powerful for you. And that's really what we want to glom onto. Like we want to grab that and harness it and find the ways and the areas of your life that we can really utilize that best to support your journey. And then what we do is we listen for the calling. And I call it the calling because I really believe that's what it is. You know, one of my clients, just recently coaching client, a beautiful woman in her 40s, and social worker. We have that in common, beautiful woman, and works in a school setting, super stressful job. She's a freaking saint, okay? And works in this job, loves the kids, loves the community. The work is so stressful, burning her out. And she and I talked probably late last spring. I knew she was feeling burnt out. We talked about, you know, what lane change can we create here for you? What can we do? She's like, I'm leaning, I might want to do, you know, some psychotherapy, a private practice. I'm like, I think that's great, right? We're kind of like getting momentum. She's like, you know, I'm going to take this summer and I'm going to really like do self-care, join one of my communities. There's a lot of self-care work, preparing herself to kind of get back in this year and at least boost a less stressful environment at school. Gets back to school, knows all the skills, knows all the tools, and in 2 weeks is like, I got to go. And had this epiphany, just like that. She knew it. It was there. I saw it last spring. It was niggling. She knew it was there. That's a calling. And what we're doing is when we get that inspiration, and I tell my clients all the time, there are no accidents. You aren't given opportunities, gifts, talents that you are not meant to use. You don't develop a dream you don't have the power to fulfill. And so that was really what I was saying to this client. And one of my greatest joys was she was going for an interview and she called me after it. I wasn't even expecting it. It was a Saturday morning. And she's like, Jen, this is it. And I'm crying. I'm like on the phone. I'm crying with her. I'm so excited that she had this calling, the perfect opportunity. The minute that she opened that door, the right exact thing happened. And so what we're looking for is that calling, the niggling, that sense of something that's kind of amiss. We're like, okay, I'm being called. How am I being called? Because opportunities start to come in. The minute I open my soul up, the minute I open my heart up for the next right thing to come in, it'll happen. And so we begin to look for those little events, the right people, right, the right story that's going to come in at just the right time when you needed it, that's going to help give you that direction you need to keep going. So we're going to look for that. And the last one, this is my key. These are my 5 secret ingredients. The last one's community. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, is not making sure on their journey they're incorporating community. Because community is everything. That who we spend our time with, we always joke, you know, that you're a culmination of the 5 people you're around the most or the environments you're in. It's absolutely true. And so my job is to develop that network, that supportive, loving community that sees my vision, that supports my vision, that's going to hold space for me, that's going to hold me accountable. We all need that community. And as I've aged, the more and more and more passionate I become about this need. And I've been developing my own. This is my own work too. This is my own insight. And so I truly believe that plugging into healthy, nurturing, loving, empowering, visionary community is one of the keys to really help elevate you on that path to purpose. That we're going to need those voices coming in, that we're going to have minutes. We're going to have doubt. It's human. I just talked about that all week long in one of my coaching communities. Like, we're going to have doubt. We're going to show up. We're human. And what we really need is those voices to come in and say, you've got this. No, you know better. This is just the doubt. This is just the fear talking. You know what you're meant to do. You have to combat that. You got to release that imposter syndrome. Your voice is the only voice. And so we really have to surround ourselves in that loving, supportive, and sweet community to help keep us going. Because when we want to backslide, when we want to kind of go, I don't know, I'm not sure about this, it's all of those people that are going to save us. They're going to be the safety net. And so that's one of my big takeaways in my entire life journey and where I've been going with this work is we need community. And so that's one of the things that I created, was because I thought we really do need community to fall back on, and many of us don't know where to find that. And so community is a really crucial component of that path of purpose as well.
You know, that's just tremendous. And listening to you talk about this, I'm thinking about the phases. You know, when you talk about how you work with someone to figure out that calling, right? And I can imagine that the bridge, navigating that bridge from, you know, discovering your calling and understanding your calling, and then taking that bridge from calling to being is probably fraught with detours and distractions, and like you talk about, you know, questioning and self-doubt. And so I think about, to me, 3 phases, and I could be wrong. There's probably more, but maybe you can help kind of define this for me. I see, you know, this first phase of, you know, I want to be this, and then at the next phase of, you know, I'm going to be, you know, develop that confidence. Yeah. Right. But then I think the biggest hurdle and probably the most difficult point is going from I'm going to be to I am, right? Because and I think a lot of people get stuck in that I'm going to be, and that's where they get, oh, well, I just need to do this one more thing first, or I need to do a little bit more to get ready, and they never can make that from that I'm going to be to I am. You know, what is it that you do? What does it look like when someone works with you to go from that, you know, I want to be, I'm going to be, to I am?
Right. And I think really, truly, what you beautifully outlined for me was what the course that I walk people through is doing. It's this we build the base of awareness, and then we begin to dive in and look at the stories, and then we begin to we unlearn first, which sounds funny. Like we almost have to dismantle to then re-put everything back together. And so what happens is, as people do that, and as they do the work, they're actually building courage and bravery skills. And it's like the unseen piece, right? It's funny because as you're doing this, and this is very akin to therapy, as you're doing the work, there's all this stuff that's happening underneath that we might not even really be talking about on the surface. And so what really happens is people begin to see. So some of the things that I do, some of the exercises I have a person do when I'm working with them in coaching is go out and inquire about, you know, what people really see in them, that I have them inquire. And it's really powerful. It was a pivotal moment for me to do this work. And so what I think is really beautiful is people begin to go, oh, I have a different lens of seeing myself. Someone else said this about me. And so you're again, unraveling and dismantling, and then you're beginning to really rebuild. And in that process, people are becoming stronger. They're beginning to see their own greatness. And that's why we're going to talk so much about it, because we need to really have you step into your bravery, because it will be easy. You're exactly right. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to but I need this other certification. Been there, done that. I have more education than I could probably use in 6 lifetimes. Been there, done that. And so what we really want to do is hold accountable that we want you to get going where you are. We work with what we have where we are. We begin with all of that. And because you're already wired for greatness, you have so much to work with. And so our first job is really, like I said, pulling off those blinders, pulling off those things that kind of get in our way, the fears, the worries, the imposter syndromes, we got to get rid of that. We got to release that. And then we want you to really step into that power. And so by the end of the course, the end of the work that I do with people, we're beginning to really build that momentum and that sense of interpersonal power. I mean, I do things where I got people standing with their hands on their hips and their hearts open wide. I mean, we're doing things literally that are accessing and helping you understand and embrace that. One of my very favorite tools, and this is going to just kind of sound a little bit off the cuff, one of my favorite tools for doing this work behind the scenes that you're trying to get at, how do we harness getting from here to here, is meditation. And that, while that sounds a little bit like, not very scientific, what I will tell you is this, that it is one of the most singularly powerful tools that I get to use with people. And I handcraft them for people as part of some of my coaching. I will actually create them specifically for each person. So when they have areas that they feel really stuck in, that's where I'll create a meditation. And I'll go in, and as they're in that very peaceful place, one of my very favorite tools is something called Yoga Nidra. We won't get into it, but it's the idea of yogic sleep. And what happens is your brain waves are in this really beautiful receptive space. And so what I'll do is use that therapeutic wisdom, insight, all my favorite stuff, all the tools, and then I'll plug in, while you're in that really beautiful space, all of these really novel ideas and powerful notions that are actually boosting you from the inside. And you're in a relaxed state. You just think you're meditating. You just think I'm sort of doing the heavy lifting. And as you're in that important receptive space with your brain and your body's at rest, I'm going to go in, and it's not hypnosis, but it has that idea, that energy to it, where I'm plugging you in with information, insight, and power that you're going to need for your journey. And so it's this, again, underneath the surface, right? Almost like in a subconscious way, we're going to go in and we're going to slide in this wisdom and this healing and the energy and the empowerment. And so what we're doing is we're building in each layer of that course and the coaching work, the ability to step more fully into that, like a ladder, if you will. And so each level, you're sort of growing that capacity for bravery and that sense of power, right? That you can step into your own greatness. And we invite you into having experiences where you can see that. You can actually see for yourself how that power shows up. And as you begin to do it, and as you begin to feel so much better, it circles back on itself, right? Because then the momentum has begun. And that's really what we need, is to begin to have and see that momentum, like, wow, if I'm out here really doing my thing, look at what magnetically comes in. Energy begets energy. When I'm excited, when I show up with an open heart and open arms, all of the right things, all the right people, snap and snap and snap, and all the things are coming in. And all I needed to do was open my mind and my heart. And I just needed to connect like an electrical socket and a plug. I just had to plug into my very best self, that highest potential of who I can be. And bam, all the things come together. And so that's really the journey, is growing that capacity to move from, I want to be, I can be, and then by God, I actually am.
Well, I'll tell you, you said something. I'm really glad you brought it up, because I think a lot of people will probably find themselves in a situation, or at least it comes to mind, because I think one of your unique strengths that you bring to the table is your clinical background, that psychology background, and the way that you combine that with the meditations, the yoga, because I think at a shallow glance, there's probably a lot of people that think that those two things conflict. And there may be people that are considering this, or maybe they have a concern or a fear that, well, maybe my significant other won't get this, because sometimes there's a hard delineation between that, you talked about the science, right, of psychology, to what, others may think of as woo-woo, or, the fairy dust, right?
Right.
Have you ever worked with someone that had that resistance, or how do you overcome that resistance, or really how do you reconcile those two when you work with people, that combination of psychology to those healing modalities to help people find that path to their purpose?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of exploring what those things really are, because there really is science, right? There really is science for breath work. There really is. So I was just talking with a colleague of mine the other day about, we laugh that things are called new age. The things that we're doing are not new. Breath work has been around for 1 million years. Yoga's been around for 1 million years. Meditation, forever, right? And so what we call it new age, which is actually not. Here's what's neat. It's one, many of those facets are actually steeped in science, and we can tell that they're so productive and helpful. And so that's one. But really understanding that if we look at ourselves, and this is the way that I explain it, if we look at ourselves as layers, okay? So I often tell people, you're like a layered cake. And so each layer of your being has its own kind of, if you want to imagine, for lack of a better word, like you are wearing suits. Okay, so I'm wrapped up in like 7 layers of suits. And so what I want to do is help people understand that if we're only looking at, for example, therapy, therapy is amazing. It's a great skill and tool. I did it for 20 years. I obviously believe in it. So, but therapy is really going to touch base in on those thought and emotional mind. Those are 2 layers of your being. That's not all 7. And then we take and we look at, oh, okay, so what you're getting at is that there's another layer, and the next layer, it might be my intuition and wisdom. It might be my soul. It could be, so those layers, what happens is we're only ever addressing in, like, for example, a scientific-based format like therapy, we're really only addressing a couple of the layers. And I think it's part of why I got so dissatisfied doing psychotherapy by itself, because I thought there's got to be more. There's got to be a different way. There's maybe there's an easier way. And what I really have developed with time is this awareness that because we are created of these layers of our being, we want to address all the layers of the being. And so that's really how I explain it to my coaching clients is likely, I'll say this, likely you've done therapy. Maybe you've done coaching. Maybe you've tried some healing modalities, right? Maybe you've done some yoga, you've done some Reiki or whatever, but have you ever done them all together? And so really what that is, what I'm saying is rather than just digesting a couple of the layers to really provide healing, what we're really looking at is all of the layers of your being. And layering up healing in that way is a completely different experience than one or the other. And so, and that's again, and talking about the science, we know that meditation is incredibly powerful and creates powerful change for people, powerful transformation. I see it all the time, right? Yoga, again, movement in our bodies. So the other thing that I suggest very often is layering services. You're layering healing modalities. So if doing one thing is great, 3 things is epic, right? So let's say I do therapy and then I say, hey, I would really love to see you add a meditation, process into that. Could we have, let's meditate. Oh, and then I think, could we journal? You like to write. So what we begin to do, all of the work that I do is really, I talk about it like a layered cake. The services are layered, our healing and our experiences, our bodies, our beings are actually layered. And so we begin to think about that way. We go, oh, so what you're saying, Jen, is if I only do X kind of healing, I'm only really getting to a certain component of my experience. And I say, yes, we know, Peter Levine, there's lots of famous psychologists out there that have talked about we carry information in ourselves. We retain memories and experiences in our very self. It's science. So that's great. But how am I going to get to it? And you can't just get to it via therapy, a traditional psychotherapy talking practice, okay? That's what somatic work is based on, which is body work, right? And so we begin to look at, that's where that importance of the awareness of the layers of energy of your being becomes so profound. And that's what I would explain to someone, like, look, I get what you're saying, and here's what it is, but here's the real deal. And this is what I know from all of my years of experience, is that people heal the most effectively when they're looking at all of those layers. And to negate them means that we're likely to cycle back through it. And it's not a judgment. I'm not, again, not dismissing psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is fantastic. I like to do like that idea of having someone address all of those layers through different modalities that they like the best. For some, that's breathing. For some, it's movement and yoga practice. For some, it's going to be, like I said, journaling, right? Everyone's really different, what really resonates for them. And so what I do that's different about me is I also provide a service where I lay out all of my favorite healing modalities for someone when they're working with me, and they get to pick their favorites. I don't just define for them, oh, well, we're just going to do Reiki, or oh, we're just going to do a little bit of tapping. I don't do that. It's very much that each and every person that comes to me is going to receive a personalized mode of working onto that path of purpose because they need their individual needs met. We are not all wired the same, okay? And so that's really an important component, I think, of this work. But you're right. I mean, people will certainly have some, I think, ideas about this. And then as soon as they start talking with me about it, that awareness blossoms. They're like, oh, okay, I get it. It's like a layered cake. So I've got to attend to all of them. And I say, yes, that's what we're getting at is you probably attended some, but have we attended to all? And have we attended to them in this way? And that's really where I think the awareness comes from. And typically it's probably just my use of humor, to be honest, right? Because I'm able to talk and share and joke and make it really accessible. And I think it stops feeling as woo, like you said, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, now I understand how that all comes together. And so I will and have certainly walked people through, this is what the process looks like, and this is why it works.
Well, I have to say, you certainly have just a remarkable gift of being able to take very conceptual ideas and create and explain them in very concrete, actionable terms. And I think that's one of the biggest missing pieces to, I think, the whole self-improvement world, right? It really is to me. And I just think it's remarkable that you are able to create that bridge. Now, I'm certain somebody out there is saying to themselves right now, I need Jen in my life. So what does that look like? How would they go about doing that? But about finding out more, getting involved, and what their options are of getting involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different layers and ways to engage in this work, which is really fun, and that's intentional because it's layered work, right? So even what I offer is really not any different. And so people can find me at my website anytime, and that's just laughinglotuswellness.com. Again, that's laughinglotuswellness.com. I always say it's a mouthful. I really wasn't thinking when I designed that for the website, but it's a little mouthy. But so you can find me there. I'm on all socials. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. People can track me down. I love to connect and honestly answer questions. It's a really powerful part of the journey is just kind of investigating. And so I do complimentary phone calls with people to just sit down and let's get together. Let's figure out if this is the right fit for you. I think that's really important that when we sit with someone that's living in integrity, that loves what they do, we come from a really heart-centered space. And so if someone comes in and I really don't think I can serve them, I'm not going to give them something I can't do. I'm not going to deliver. If it doesn't feel like the right fit, I will give them some resources and ideas and tools to take with them and lovingly send them on their way. That's right. So the real deal is sitting down with someone and understanding that this is a meeting of the minds, and is this the right fit? And that's why that complimentary call is so important. But absolutely, you can find me on my website anytime. Reach out in any of those venues and let me know if there's anything I can do. And like I said, if you come to the complimentary call, I promise you're always going to leave with some tools that you didn't have when you came in with, which is really neat. And that's always just my testament to the passion that I have for this journey and that I want to live a life of service and legacy. And so for me, we always want to find the right fit. And I said it in therapy for a million years. I would sit across from someone and one of the very first things I'd say after introducing myself is at the end of the session, we're going to revisit and see how things went today. And if I'm the right fit for you or not. And if I'm not, I'm going to lovingly send you where you need to be. And so that's always really, truly, the heart of the servant is getting you where you need to be, whether or not that's with me. That's what we'll decide. And usually I feel really blessed that the right people get drawn in, right? When we open our hearts and we open up to that expansive idea, the right people show up. But that's always my testament to my work is always to show up with that heart space. And so would love to connect with someone if they feel like they were listening today and driven into trying to kind of figure out and unravel some of these things. That's really what I'm here to do. And that is my purpose is transformation and supporting people in that journey. Well, I think there's a lot of people, very fortunate people that benefit from the fact that you found your path to purpose. And this was and this was it. And I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing this. And I think anyone who listens to this realizes that there is no, speaking to you, there is no sense of intimidation or judgment. And I just think, that's something that stops so many people from moving forward and really hitting their potential in life. So thank you for coming on and sharing that. Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jack. This was such a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. So, folks, there you have it. Definitely check out Jennifer Zenz-Olson. Check out laughinglotuswellness.com. We'll have the link there and also the link to
how you can connect to Jennifer on social media as well. Until next time on Influencers Radio, remember, you are the only real game changer.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today.